This is me, July 29th, 2008. It is 12:33 Mountain Time. Covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented.
On the morning of December 7th, 2009, in West Valley City, Utah, Susan Cox Powell, a 28-year-old devoted wife and mother of two young boys, had mysteriously vanished without a trace.
Josh had taken the children on a middle-of-the-night camping trip.
He said he was out driving around, he'd gone out camping with the boys. And I'm like, are you a crazy man? It was cold.
Police received a call that would unravel one of the most disturbing and tragic cases in recent history.
About the fire in the 8200 block of 188th Street.
Yes, he the house, and he blew up the house and the kids. The kids and the husband and the father were in the house? Yes, he slammed the door in my face. So I kept knocking. I thought it was a mistake. I kept knocking, and then I called 911.
Her husband, Josh Powell, claimed to know nothing about her whereabouts, yet his behavior and alibi quickly raised suspicions.
9 o'clock that night, Jennifer told me that Josh and the boys are home, and I'm like, well, where's Susan? And she said, we don't know.
What made the case even more puzzling was Josh's explanation of where he had been the night before. He told authorities that, in the middle of a freezing December night, he had taken their 2- and 4-year-old sons camping in the Utah desert.
Susan would have never allowed him to ever take the boys out in the winter.
Who were you camping with?
My dad and my mom.
Susan Cox met Josh Powell in the early 2000s. At first, their relationship seemed loving and promising, and they quickly got married in 2001. However, beneath the surface, their marriage was far from perfect. Josh was an extremely controlling and manipulative husband. He controlled the family's finances, forced Susan to follow strict rules, and kept her isolated from friends and family. Their financial situation was unstable, with Josh accumulating over $200,000 in debt due to reckless spending. He refused to let Susan handle money, despite her working full-time, and even limited her access to basic necessities. Friends recalled that Susan often had to ask permission to spend money on groceries, even though she was the one earning a steady income. Even more disturbing was the role of Josh's father, Susan Powell, in their marriage. Stephen had developed a disturbing and obsessive infatuation with Susan, which he documented in extensive journals. He wrote about his lust for her, stole her personal belongings, including her underwear, and even secretly filmed her without her knowledge. At one point, he even attempted to kiss her, leaving Susan feeling uncomfortable and unsafe. Fearing for her safety, Susan confided in friends and began documenting her assets and personal belongings in case something happened to her. A month before she vanished, she wrote a secret will, stating that if she died, it might not be an accident, even if it looked like one. Susan knew she was in danger, but no one could have predicted the horrors that would follow. On December 6, 2009, Susan attended a church service with her two sons, Charles and Braden. Afterward, a friend visited her at home in the afternoon, and everything seemed normal. That evening, Josh claimed that he took their sons on a spontaneous camping trip around midnight, while Susan, according to him, stayed home. The next morning, Susan never showed up for work, and her sons never arrived at daycare. Friends and co-workers became concerned when they couldn't reach her. Police were called, and when they arrived at the Powell home, they found no sign of forced entry, but they discovered 2 box fans blowing on a wet spot on the living room carpet. Susan's purse, phone, wallet, and keys were still inside, suggesting she had never left the house willingly. Hours later, Josh finally returned home with the boys, appearing disoriented and confused when questioned about where he had been. He told police that he had simply forgotten what day it was, which was why he had not gone to work. Investigators immediately found his story suspicious, especially considering that it was freezing cold outside and not an ideal time to take small children camping. As detectives pressed him for details, Josh's story kept changing, and he seemed completely indifferent to Susan's sudden disappearance. The inconsistencies in his alibi made him an immediate person of interest in the case. As soon as Susan Powell was reported missing, Josh Powell's behavior immediately raised red flags. He showed no concern for his missing wife, and his alibi was filled with contradictions. The claim that he had taken their 2 young children camping in the middle of a freezing December night was not only bizarre, but also highly suspicious. Investigators were determined to uncover the truth. When questioned, Josh struggled to provide a consistent timeline of his whereabouts. He told police that he had left for a spontaneous camping trip around midnight on December 6, 2009, and returned home the evening of December 7th. However, Josh had work that morning and never notified his employer that he would be absent. When asked why, he claimed that he thought it was Sunday instead of Monday, a weak excuse that detectives found hard to believe. Inside the Powell home, police discovered 2 box fans blowing over a damp spot on the carpet, indicating that something had been cleaned recently. Further investigation revealed small traces of blood on the tile floor near the couch, which was later confirmed to be Susan's blood. Adding to the suspicion, Josh's 4-year-old son, Charles, made a chilling statement when questioned by investigators. He told them that his mother had gone on the camping trip with them, but never came back.
Okay, so Charlie, when you guys came home from camping, who came home with you?
My dad
And?
and my mom stayed at the National Park.
Your mom stayed there?
Yeah.
How do you know your mom stayed?
Because I was coming.
Because you were coming.
Yeah.
So your mom stayed at the park.
Yeah.
Where did she stay at the park?
She
Do you know where?
stayed at the National Park.
Do you know where at the park? No?
No. My mom stayed where a crystals are.
Where what are?
Where crystals are.
The crystals? Crystals?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Crystals?
Yeah.
This statement directly contradicted Josh's claim that Susan had stayed home while he took the children out. Josh initially told police that Susan's phone was missing, suggesting that she had it with her when she disappeared. However, when officers searched Josh's car, they found Susan's phone hidden inside. Even more damning, the phone contained a voicemail message from Josh.
Susan, we are on our way back, and I can't believe that somehow my brain missed the day. I thought today was Sunday. That was really, really stupid. All right, I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.
Which he had left hours after Susan had already vanished, a clear indication that he was trying to fabricate a cover story. Josh's behavior in the days following Susan's disappearance only deepened the police's suspicions. Instead of cooperating with investigators or assisting in the search for his wife, Josh immediately hired a defense attorney and refused to take a polygraph test. He stopped speaking to the media, withdrew large sums of money, and within weeks packed up his belongings and moved to Washington State to live with his father, Susan Powell. Authorities later discovered that Josh had conducted disturbing internet searches in the months before Susan's disappearance. He had researched how to dispose of a body in abandoned mine shafts, a chilling detail considering that Utah's deserts are filled with deep, hidden mine shafts. Police believed that Josh had planned Susan's murder well in advance and may have used one of these mine shafts to hide her body permanently. As investigators continued their search, Josh's father, Susan Powell, also became a person of interest. Stephen had been obsessed with Susan for years, secretly recording videos of her, stealing her underwear, and writing about his sexual fantasies involving her in personal journals. During their investigation, police uncovered thousands of voyeuristic images and videos on Susan Powell's computer, many of which featured women and young girls filmed without their knowledge. Shockingly, some of these images were of Susan, further implicating him in the case. Susan Powell was arrested in 2011 for voyeurism charges, but police could not directly link him to Susan's disappearance. Authorities conducted extensive searches in the Utah desert, focusing on abandoned mine shafts where they believed Josh might have disposed of Susan's body. Despite multiple search operations, her body was never found. One of the strongest theories was that Josh had enlisted his brother, Michael Powell, to help cover up the crime. Michael had been deeply loyal to Josh and was later discovered to have disposed of his car at a salvage yard just days after Susan vanished. When police tested the vehicle, cadaver dogs detected the scent of human decomposition in the trunk, but DNA tests were inconclusive. Michael Powell later died by in 2013, taking whatever secrets he had about Susan's disappearance with him. As the investigation continued, Josh Powell remained the prime suspect, but police struggled to arrest him without a body or direct physical evidence linking him to Susan's murder. However, his disturbing behavior led authorities to believe he was dangerous, and he ultimately lost custody of his two sons. The children were placed in the care of Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox, as the investigation into their mother's disappearance remained open. Josh fought to regain custody, but the legal system was closing in on him, and detectives were working to build a case that could finally lead to his arrest. However, before police could bring charges against Josh, he made one final horrifying decision that would ensure no one would ever know the full truth about what happened to Susan. As the investigation into Susan Powell's disappearance continued, police turned their attention to Josh Powell's father, Stephen Powell, whose disturbing obsession with Susan had raised concerns for years. Although Josh remained the primary suspect in his wife's disappearance, authorities had not yet gathered enough evidence to arrest him. However, in 2011, a shocking discovery at Stephen Powell's home led to his immediate arrest and set off a chain of events that would ultimately push Josh to his breaking point. The search of Stephen Powell's home, with Josh now living in Puyallup, Washington, at his father's house, police obtained a search warrant to look for evidence related to Susan's disappearance. When they entered the Powell home, they found volumes of disturbing material that would change the course of the investigation. Investigators uncovered thousands of images and videos of women and young girls, most of them taken without their knowledge. Among these images, police found several that featured Susan Powell, confirming suspicions that Stephen had been secretly recording her. In addition to the photographs, authorities found Stephen's handwritten journals, which contained graphic descriptions of his infatuation with Susan. He had written extensively about his desire for her, admitting that he had stolen personal belongings from her, including underwear. The evidence was overwhelming, and on September 22, 2011, Stephen Powell was arrested and charged with 14 counts of voyeurism and 1 count of possession of child pornography. Josh Powell loses custody of his children. Stephen Powell's arrest had serious consequences for Josh, who was already facing intense scrutiny from law enforcement. With his father now in jail and their home exposed as a place of criminal activity, Child Protective Services stepped in to reevaluate Josh's fitness as a parent. A judge determined that Josh's living environment was unsafe, and in September 2011, he lost custody of his two sons, Charles and Braden. The children were placed in the care of Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox, who had been fighting for custody for months. Although Josh was allowed the supervised visitation, he was now under constant watch. His repeated attempts to regain full custody were denied, and it became clear that authorities were still building a case against him. This legal setback left Josh feeling cornered. He had evaded arrest for Susan's disappearance, but now he was losing the only leverage he had left, his children. As the noose tightened around him, Josh began to spiral, ultimately making a horrifying decision that would leave an irreversible mark on this case. On February 5, 2012, Josh was granted a supervised visit with his children. When the social worker arrived, Josh quickly pulled the boys inside and locked the door. Moments later, she smelled gasoline and frantically called 911.
Okay, I'm on a supervised visitation for a court-ordered visit, and something really weird has happened. The kids went into the house, and the parent, the biological parent, whose name is Josh Powell, will not let me in the door. What should I do?
What's the address?
It's 8119, and I think it's 89th. I don't know what the address is.
Okay, that's pretty important for me to know.
And I'd like to pull out of the driveway because I smell gasoline, and he won't let me in.
You want to pull out of the driveway because you smell gasoline, but he won't let you...
He won't let me in.
He won't let you out of the driveway?
He won't let me in the house.
Whose house
Got
is
the
it?
kids in the house, and he won't let me in. It's a supervised visit.
I understand. Whose house is it?
Josh Powell.
Okay.
Yeah,
You're
I
supervising
supervise
yourself?
I supervise myself. I'm the supervisor here. Okay, how long will it be?
I don't know, ma'am. They have to respond to emergency, life-threatening situations first. The first available deputy
Well,
is responding.
this could be life-threatening.
Within minutes, a massive explosion shook the neighborhood.
About the fire in the 8200 block of
Yes, he
188th Street.
exploded the house. And he blew up the house and the kids. The kids and the husband and the father were in the house. Yeah, yes, he slammed the door in my face. So I kept knocking. I thought it was a mistake. I kept knocking, and then I called 911.
Firefighters arrived to find the house completely engulfed in flames. When the fire was extinguished, they discovered the bodies of Josh, Charles, and Braden inside. Josh had set the house on fire in a murder suicide, killing his children before taking his own life. An autopsy later revealed that Josh had struck both boys with a hatchet before they died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Minutes before the explosion, Josh had sent emails to family members saying goodbye.
He said something about he can't live without his sons, and I'm not afraid of him. He'd never hurt me. I'm afraid of seeing something. I don't want to see it.
Confirming that this was a premeditated act of revenge against those trying to take his children away. A year later, Josh's brother, Michael Powell, committed suicide, jumping from a 7-story building. Police had suspected that Michael helped Josh dispose of Susan's body, and his death only deepened the mystery surrounding her fate. Their father, Susan Powell, was released from prison in 2017, but died a year later. To this day, Susan Powell's body has never been found. Authorities believe Josh disposed of her remains in an abandoned Utah mine shaft, making recovery nearly impossible. In 2013, the case was officially closed, with the conclusion that Josh Powell murdered Susan, but the truth died with him. The story of Susan Powell is one of the most heartbreaking mysteries in modern history. A loving mother vanished without a trace, leaving behind 2 young boys who would never see her again. Although all the evidence pointed to her husband, Josh Powell, he was never arrested for her disappearance. Instead, he made a terrible decision that ended not only his own life, but also the lives of his 2 innocent children, Charles and Braden. The tragedy of this case is not just that Susan was never found, but that her 2 young sons, who could have lived happy and full lives, were taken away in an unthinkable act by their own father. Their grandparents, Chuck and Judy Cox, fought hard to protect them, but in the end, the justice system could not stop what happened. Even though police and volunteers searched for years, Susan's body was never found. Investigators believe that Josh may have hidden her remains in an abandoned mine somewhere in the Utah desert, a place so deep and dangerous that it would be nearly impossible to find. In 2013, the case was officially closed, with authorities stating that Josh was responsible for Susan's disappearance, but the full truth had died with him. Susan Powell's story serves as a reminder of the importance of recognizing the warning signs of danger in relationships. Her friends and family saw the struggles she faced, and she even left behind messages saying that if something happened to her, it might not be an accident. Sadly, her fears came true, and the justice she deserved never fully came. Though years have passed, Susan's memory lives on through her family, who continue to honor her and her sons. Her parents and loved ones still hope that one day her remains may be found so that they can finally lay her to rest. This case teaches us a valuable lesson about love, trust, and paying attention to those who may be in danger. Susan Powell was a wonderful mother, daughter, and friend, and she deserved a life filled with happiness and safety. Though her story ended in tragedy, she will never be forgotten.